It's Bob Casey up against Nikki Haley in this hypothetical 2024 presidential matchup. Today on Political Access, we're going to go through all the states and we're going to find a winner. This was suggested to me in the comments, so let's get started. Safe states are over a 10-point margin, likely 5 to 10 points, lean under 5 points, and tilt 1 point or less. So how would this one go? Well, first of all, Bob Casey, he's the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. He's been in office since 2007. He's known for being a little bit more moderate, and he was actually a pro-life Democrat. And also Casey's dad, he was well known in Pennsylvania politics. He was the governor of Pennsylvania at one point, so the Casey name is very well known in that state. And Bob Casey is not at all known for being on the fringe, so that should help him in certain places like the suburbs, independents, swing voters. Now, Casey did recently come out and say he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He's going to undergo treatment. So we all hope that clears up, but we don't know if he's going to actually run for re-election in 24. Now, on the other hand, Nikki Haley, she was the governor of South Carolina. She did step down to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Donald Trump. She has the backstory of being the daughter of immigrants, but she's also regarded as being more establishment. So she has the task of trying to bridge the Trump base with the Republican establishment. It's not going to be easy to do, but her name recognition is pretty high. Just like Bob Casey, he's also going to have to try to bridge the progressive gap with the Democratic base. Both of them have their work cut out for them in that regard. So this is going to be a good battle. Let's get started in Alaska. That's usually a red state, and I do have Nikki Haley winning that by over 10 points, safe for Haley. Hawaii, one of the bluest states in the country, safe for Casey. Up to the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, and California, those are going to be over 10 points and safe for Bob Casey. Next state is Nevada. This is the first competitive state, probably trending slowly toward the right. Republicans would love to put this one in their column. One other thing to mention about these two candidates, personality and charisma-wise, I don't think Bob Casey has it. He's more on the bland side, in my opinion. Nikki Haley, she's not necessarily bland, but I don't think there's really much excitement there either. Now, all that considered, in a state like Nevada, at a presidential level, it does still tilt to lean toward the Democrats. Given Bob Casey is pretty non-threatening, he's viewed as a little bit more moderate on a few issues. I tend to think Nevada would vote for Bob Casey. Not sure the margin, but I put it as a tilt for Casey. Idaho and Utah, safe for Haley. How about Arizona? This used to be a state that was expected to go to the Republicans pretty easily. It's more of an establishment state. Neither of these two candidates are really all that anti-establishment. Given its GOP background, I do think Nikki Haley would be a little stronger here. Some voters have left the Republican Party during the Donald Trump years, but I think Haley is appealing enough to win back some of the suburban voters in and around Maricopa County. I don't think Bob Casey would do really all that bad here, but in the end, given the historical lean of the state, and with these two candidates, I have it as a tilt for Haley. Montana, Wyoming, safe for Haley. Colorado, that I have as just under 10 points. Likely for Bob Casey. I think Bob Casey might be a little weak when it comes to progressive voters, and there are some of them in Colorado. Some of them are going to stay home and not want to be excited about coming out for Bob Casey. Nikki Haley, she's not going to get the Trump kind of turnout, but she's also not going to have a lot of people in the middle that want to come out to vote against her. So that's why it gets under 10 points and likely for Casey. Next state, New Mexico. This I have as just over 5 points, probably about 5.5, likely for Bob Casey. Up to North Dakota and South Dakota, those are safe over 10 points for Nikki Haley. Nebraska at large, that is going to go safe for Haley. The second district, that's the Omaha district, it's more suburban, got a little bit redder after redistricting. Trump actually won this in 2016, lost it by a likely margin in 2020. And this was actually a tough call for me. I have it for Bob Casey. That's an easy call, but the margin, it was borderline lean likely, probably just at about 5 points. So I kept it at lean for Bob Casey, but I could see it hitting a likely margin. Next state is Kansas, safe for Haley. Oklahoma, also safe for Haley. How about in Texas? Well, this will be likely for Nikki Haley. The progressive voters in Texas, some of them will reluctantly vote for Bob Casey because he's a Democrat, but some of the hardliners, they're not going to really come out for the guy. And the same is probably true for the hardline Trump voters. Some of them are going to stay home for Nikki Haley, but most of them would come out and support the Republican nominee, and Haley would win Texas by 6-7 points. Let's go up to Minnesota. This is a state that has a lot of legacy Democrats that haven't moved over to the Republicans like some nearby Rust Belt states of Wisconsin and Michigan. I think Bob Casey would do well here in the suburbs around the Twin Cities, and I also don't think he would do bad in the Iron Range, as well as some of the light blue or light red counties throughout the rest of the state. So all that said, I have Minnesota as a likely for Bob Casey. This is mid, maybe even up to high single digits. Let's move on to Iowa, and that has become more of a red state. A little bit tough for the Democrats to win it these days, so I do have it as a likely for Nikki Haley. Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, safe for Haley. Let's go up to Wisconsin. This is a real tough call for me. After carefully considering all the different factors of turnout in the different parts of the state with these two candidates, I settled on a tilt for Bob Casey. Next state, Illinois, safe for Casey. Let's move over to Michigan. Again, trying to consider all the turnout in some of those red Trump counties that have moved away from the Democrats. I think those voters culturally are more aligned with the Republicans on some economic issues. Bob Casey and his non-threatening personality, I think, would win over a lot of the union voters and enough working-class voters to carry Michigan by a lean margin, somewhere between 2 and 4 points. Indiana, safe for Haley. Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, safe for Haley. Let's go down to Florida. Now, this is a state where we know in the midterms it went toward the Republicans by a lot. But on a presidential level, I'm not sure if it's going to be mid to high single digits just yet for any Republican. And considering that Bob Casey is just a little bit more moderate than some progressive, more left Democrats, I don't think as many people would be scared off by him. But Nikki Haley, she was from South Carolina. It might help her a little bit more here in the South. But all that considered, I do have it as a leans for Nikki Haley, probably right at the 5-point mark. So I do understand if you want to put it at likely. Now let's go one state up to Georgia. And this is a state we know has been moving away from the Republicans. The Atlanta suburbs, that's where a lot of the shift has been toward the left. Nikki Haley, she's from neighboring South Carolina. As I just said, that would probably help her on the margins, being from the South. But Bob Casey, I don't think he would really do all that bad in the Atlanta suburbs. But some of those voters that maybe were a little scared off by Trump, just like they were in Arizona, I think just enough of them would come back to get Nikki Haley over the hump, and she would win Georgia by a tilt margin, but I think it would be extremely close, probably only by 1/4 of a point. And let's go to Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina. That, of course, would be safe for most Republicans, and Nikki Haley is not going to be an exception. She wins that by way over 10 points. Let's go one state up to North Carolina. This will go leans for Nikki Haley. This is, again, similar to Florida, probably right at the 5-point mark. For me, Bob Casey being a little bit more electable than some progressives, that keeps it under a likely margin. Let's jump up to Ohio. This has become mostly a red state at this point, and Nikki Haley is going to win this by a likely margin, somewhere between 5 and 10 points. West Virginia, this is a very red state. Nikki Haley wins it by a safe margin. Let's jump up to the Northeast here in Maine. At large, likely for Bob Casey. The first district, that's much bluer, that goes safe for Casey. The second district, that is much redder. It's more Trump-friendly. Nikki Haley would win this by a leans margin. I don't think it would necessarily get over 5 points, at least not when going up against Bob Casey. Next state over is New Hampshire, and this tends to be a little bit more friendly toward the Democrats. The right Republican can win it, but Bob Casey is not the wrong Democrat. Nikki Haley, she's not overly strong in my opinion, so I do have Bob Casey winning New Hampshire by a leans margin, probably 3 to 5 points. Let's move on to Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. all safe for Bob Casey. It would take a lot for any of those margins to get under 10, and it's not going to happen in this matchup. Now let's move on to Pennsylvania. This is Bob Casey's home state, so there's no question he would win it, and I do have it as over 5 points, probably mid-single digits, possibly even high single digits. And finally, the last state is Virginia. The D.C. suburbs have become very blue and very establishment. There is a lot of red vote in some parts of Virginia. It's just not going to be enough to outweigh all that blue vote. And Bob Casey would win Virginia by a likely margin over 5 points. And that's the map, and that would result in 262 electoral votes for Nikki Haley, 276 for Bob Casey. So Bob Casey actually very narrowly wins this election, and I do think it would be a close match. Progressives are not going to be thrilled about Bob Casey, but he would have a lot more appeal in those suburbs and with independents. Nikki Haley would also have more appeal with that same group, and a lot of them were turned off by Donald Trump, so I think she would get a few of them back, but not enough to win this election. I don't think Nikki Haley would get the kind of turnout she would need from the red Trump counties, and that would keep her from getting over the finish line in some of these Rust Belt states. Now, if Bob Casey focuses on economics, doesn't veer off into social justice and other controversial issues associated with the Democrats, I think he would be able to win this election. But of course, this is extremely close. A lot of things could change the margins in some of these states, such as their running mates, the national environment, and whichever issues they choose to make the centerpiece of their campaigns. But this is just what I settled on. Let me know in the comments. Do you mostly agree with this map? Or would you change the margin in a place like Florida? Or would you flip Wisconsin, Nevada, or Arizona? Let me know down below. And on your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.